Let me switch gears here a little bit. Where do you see the future really in the data world, right? If sky's the limit and we have unlimited storage and compute, Ray Kurzweil is right, and we have chips that are faster in our brains, in something like 5 years, right? Where's this going?
Yeah, so to me, actually, I think we already see a preview of the future. I'm talking about enterprise data right now. I think we see a preview of that feature already in the consumer world. Think of the Apple App Store, for example. And I don't know, over 1 million apps right now at this point. But the apps are already separated from the data, right? The data is your data that the apps operate on is kind of under your control. You may have a separate repository that you use for it, either your own or iCloud, etc. And the apps are extremely modular. And the apps come and go very quickly. The data lives a lot longer.
Yeah.
If you contrast that with the enterprise world, the enterprise world has been one where the data has been very closely tied to the apps. You have ERP apps or CRM apps or other kinds of apps or custom apps where the data models, etc., have been very closely tied. You still have some separation, that's why you can reuse the data, but the data and the apps have been very closely tied together. To me, that world is going to go the same way as the consumer world already has gone. So if you ask me about the future, it's like the data models, the understanding of what different data types are, whether it's schema on read or predefined schema and things like that. The data will be designed for durability and will be designed for essentially to be used by a variety of apps, maybe cloud-based apps, maybe on-premise apps, etc., etc. The apps will become a lot more modular, and the apps will come and go, and maybe apps may be segmented by user base or by business need way more so than they have been in the past, right? So I think, to me, that's the future of the world of data, is that very clearly defined around data as the asset, data being separate from the apps and consumable by the apps, of course, otherwise it's useless, but clearly a clear separation between the two.
So we maybe have all of our enterprise data sitting in S3 and then just spin up.
It could be a private cloud, it could be S3, maybe
wherever,
exactly.
But there's a data repository, and we spin up apps as we need.
We spin up apps as we need, and there's clear interfaces between them. I mean, we already see this happening. If you look at all the API world, etc., there's already enough. There's enough there to know, but I think it'll just go to the next level where clearly there's a data architecture, and it's not a subset of the application architecture. It is a separate but equal, if you will, architecture.
And will all applications just be kind of stitched together fabric of web APIs?
I believe so. I mean, the APIs themselves may evolve. I'm assuming they'll evolve. They'll also evolve in conjunction with what's going on in the application infrastructure world. You see around containerization and things like that. So that'll also influence the API layers. So the APIs, I'm pretty sure, will evolve. But it's essentially the idea that you described, is you have data, and you have the availability of data, and then the application, and a lot of the concepts that you already have in the big data world, which is bring the application to the data, etc., will obviously be very relevant there. So I think, but there will clearly be an ability to try out apps, which are very quick. You can build an app in a week, try it out. If it's not the right app, you iterate on it. All the kinds of things that you described with what's going on. Today, the data is the barrier. I mean, if you want to try out an app in a week today, even just provisioning the data, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
Exactly.
What's some of the interesting open source technologies that you are watching?
Oh, Spark for sure.
Yeah.
We're doing a lot of work with Spark. In fact, at Informatica World, we had Professor Franklin from AmpLab. He was the keynote speaker for us. We see.
Is it ready for prime time?
That's a very good question. I mean, we are releasing the first version of our product later this year with Spark in it. Obviously, we have a user base that is conservative. So if they start using it, it answers your question. So I mean, we should meet again and drink that Guinness, in a few months, and then we can. But I think it is definitely, I believe, getting there. There's a lot of attention, and there is a clear need for something like Spark. So I think it's architecturally, it seems to be very sound. There was a lot of customer interest, and obviously not only us, a lot of companies are building to that technology base. So I think it shows a lot of promise. So to us, that's one clear area which is a lot of interest.
And is Informatica then basically putting a security on top of Spark, right? I mean, that's a lag right now.
Right.
There's
You know, the holistic way to think about it is, you know, Informatica essentially has had its own processing engine, right? That engine is really our pride and joy because we have built it so that it can run on Teradata, it can run on Hadoop, et cetera, that we have built this so that all the work that's been done using Informatica last 25 years can be repurposed, right? That's the
most important thing.
That's the most important thing. So what we're doing now is saying, can we re-implement that in Spark, right? I mean, if we can take any work that somebody did, you know, using extracting data from whatever system, processing it and putting it to a target, if we can redo it so that you can reuse it in Spark, and then Spark itself, you know, basically it doesn't depend, it coexists very nicely with Hadoop, but you know, it can work with HDFS, it can work with other technologies. So it's a nice layer of abstraction that, so for us, the intellectual property would be, we know how customers have used data in the past, and that's embedded into the mappings and the work they've done in the past. If we can bring all of that into Spark, that's a major coup. On a new technology, they get the benefit of the new technology, they get the benefit of all this massively parallel processing and you know, all of that, Moore's law, like you said, but without throwing away any of the work that they've done in the past. That's our goal.
What's your feeling that Spark is leaning in more and more on Kafka?
Yeah, I think different layers, I believe, in the sense that Spark is much more of, if you will, a processing layer. It's much more of it's essentially a compute engine, right? It's a compute engine. Whereas Kafka is much more of a data ingestion layer, data streaming layer. I believe that they will coexist. I mean, you know, of course, in terms of streaming, there are a lot of different protocols. So I think there's a lot more to be seen to see which one kind of wins out, etc. But it looks like for the data streaming use cases with high volume data, Kafka definitely seems to be getting some traction there. We have some proprietary technology too, so we got the dog in that fight. So, but you know, we're very agnostic. You know, the world moves quickly, and for us, it's more important to make sure that we do what customer wants rather than stick to some specific protocol or technology.
That's a great perspective. The reason I was asking is that some of the reliability technology that Spark is rolling in is heavily relying on replaying, you know, Kafka queues and those kind of things.
Right.
So what, of course, kind of, you know, tints the directions a little bit, informs the direction which Storm, et cetera, is leaning on top of Spark than in maybe, you know, prefers one dog over the other.
Yeah, exactly. Got it.
Beyond Spark, what else is exciting for you?
I mean, we look at a lot of the container technologies, so that's very interesting. Docker is very interesting in my view. I mean, because I think it's, you know, especially because before at Symantec, I not only did security, I also was involved in some of the storage software, server software that came from Veritas, you know, which was the HA technologies and the grid technologies. And Docker has the potential to change a lot of that, right? Because, you know, instead of a traditional grid that you can think of, you know, Docker could make it much more easy to roll out. I mean, for example, think of a cloud application architecture where, you know, 5 years ago, multi-tenancy was the big deal, right? You had to have multi-tenancy to be scalable. Now you can think of a world where maybe Docker says you don't need multi-tenancy because, you know,
We solve that for you.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think if that world I mean, to me, that this world of what we talked about, the application layer and the data layer, I think Docker plays a critical role. Or some containerization. Docker seems to be the most promising, but that containerization plays a critical role in enabling that interface. You know? So that's the other big one that we're watching and working.